أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف المرسلين وعلى صحبه أجمعين ومن اتبع على سنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. uh, Brothers and sisters, I greet you with the greeting of Islam, which is to say, may the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon you. After that greeting, we send peace and blessings upon his messenger Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and upon his companions, and upon all those who follow them in guidance until the day of judgment. Now, as to what proceeds, inshallah, we continue with our lessons of Mukhtasar al-Akhdari, of Imam al-Akhdari, wherein he details the basic elements of morals, of purification, and of prayer. In the last section, we had talked about those things that are not permissible for a person that is not in a state of wudu to do. And he had informed us that a person that has no wudu, that it's not permissible for them to pray salah, that it's not permissible for them to pray tawaf, to perform tawaf around the Kaaba, meaning to circumambulate, as you would say in English, which means to go around something, circumambulate. It's not permissible for them to circumambulate the Kaaba, which is known as tawaf in Arabic. It's not permissible for them to touch a copy of the Quran or its cover, either with their hand or with a stick or with something similar to that. He said that it's only permissible for a person that can touch a section of it is a person that's learning from it, even if they don't have wudu, such as a small child or a woman that's on her period due to the necessity of having to learn the Quran. He says just as you're not allowed to touch the Quran, its cover itself, or its actual mushaf and the book, you're also not allowed to touch a tablet of the Quran. Meaning the Quran is written on a wooden tablet, which is very common in most parts of the world. You're not allowed to touch it if you don't have wudu, because it's the Quran. Except if you are a student that's learning from that tablet, or a teacher that's correcting the recitation of the student that's learning from that tablet. In that case, it would become too much of a burden for them to ensure that they have wudu. One, because the student is oftentimes a child and can be very lax about these things and undisciplined. Two, because there's more than one such student. There's often dozens to hundreds of students in a single situation, in a single location. So expecting all of them to make wudu would be a undue burden. And since they're children, the responsibility would fall upon one person, which would be difficult to ensure. And then three, the person that's teaching them is in a single location. Now, and then he said that a child has the same ruling as an adult when it comes to touching the Quran without wudu, meaning that it's not permissible. And if somebody puts the child towards doing it without one of the aforementioned excuses or concessions, then that person would be the one that incurs the sin. Now, so today, inshallah, we will get into the section that begins on ghusl. Ghusl is, linguistically speaking, it just means a bath, but when it's used in the context of the sacred law, it refers to a bath for the purpose of, it refers to a bath that has specific steps and specific elements and a specific intention, oftentimes, but not always, for the purpose of removing one of three states, or for the purpose of just meeting the sunnah, for example, the sunnah of Jum'ah. So oftentimes it is a requirement to perform ghusl, but it's not always a requirement. But here he's going to tell us about the situations where it's a requirement for a person to perform ghusl. So, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. He says, Faslun, this is a section. He says, يجب الغسل من ثلاثة أشياء. He says, ghusl, the ritual bath that we mentioned, it is obligatory for three things. Whenever three things occur, it's obligatory. The first is al-janaba. Al-janaba refers to major ritual impurity, and he's going to give you an explanation of that just right now. The reason why it's called janaba is because janaba means, it refers to the distance. It's as though you're distant from performing any acts of worship because of being in a major state of ritual impurity. And we compare that to hadath, which is a minor state of ritual impurity, such as urine. Those are things that they just require wudu to remove them. Whereas janaba requires ghusl to remove it. So the first the first thing that requires in instances which making ghusl is obligatory is al-janaba, is major ritual impurity. The second is al-hayd, is menstruation. That when a woman finishes her menstrual cycle and she wants to pray again, before she can pray again, she has to perform ghusl. The third thing is an-nifas, which is, or an-nifas, which is postpartum bleeding. Postpartum bleeding means that after a woman gives birth, it's very common, it's actually the norm, for the woman to bleed for quite some time. Could be 2 weeks, could be a month, could be 40 days, whatever the case might be. Once that period ends, then in order for the woman to pray again, she would have to make ghusl. So nafas and hayd are very similar as far as the fact that they prevent the woman from praying, and the fact that they only occur in women, and the fact that in order to pray again, once they're completed, the woman would need to perform ghusl. He says, فَالْجَنَابَةُ قِسْمَانِ. He says, al-janaba, major ritual impurity, is of two types. He says, أَحَدُهُمَا, he says, the first of them, خُرُوجُ الْمَنِيِّ بِلَذَّةٍ مُعْتَادَةٍ فِي نَوْمٍ أَوْ يَقَظٍ بِجِمَاعٍ أَوْ غَيْرِهِ. He says, the first type is the emission of ejaculatory fluid, sperm for the man and vaginal discharge for the woman. Biladhatin, and due to pleasure. Mu'tadatin, pleasure that occurs in a normal way. So we're for example, if a person is walking and he strikes something, like something hits him in the private parts, and he happens to have sperm come out of his private parts out of extreme fear, that's not considered as ladhatin mu'tadatin, as normally occurring pleasure. You understand? Because there's an extenuating circumstance that caused that, right? But he says fi nomin, whether it happens in his sleep, because it's normal for people to have wet dreams, so that's normally occurring. Aw yaqadatin, or in his wakeful state, or her wakeful state, bijima'in, due to sexual intercourse, aw ghayrihi, or something other than that. So for example, it could be masturbation, it could be playing with themselves. Generally speaking, it's masturbation. It could be looking so long that you, with pleasure at something, that sperm comes out of you or vaginal discharge comes out of you. You understand? So he says biladhatin mu'tadatin. So this is very important. It's pleasure that occurs normally. You understand? So that's the first type of janaba, meaning that whether you have intercourse, or whether you play with yourself, which is haram, or whether you're looking at something that's haram, which is haram as well, which causes for sperm to come out of you, or for the woman to have an orgasmic state that releases vaginal discharge, then what would occur is that you would be in a state of janaba, and you would need to make ghusl. You understand? He says, وَالثَّانِي, and the second form of janaba, the second way in which janaba occurs, he says, مَغِيبُ الْحَشَفَةِ فِي الْفَرْجِ, is the disappearance of the tip of the private part of the male into the private part of the female. So what this means is that as soon as a man enters his private parts into a woman's private parts, or two people enter their private parts into another private parts, then that would require ghusl. You understand? I don't want to make you use your imagination, but there's some people, they're perverted. So some people, they end up having intercourse with other men, which is completely haram. And anyone that has intercourse with a man, that person is going against the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that person is cursed. That in that situation, they would still have to do ghusl. Some people are even worse. They perform what's known as bestiality, in which they engage in intercourse with animals. May Allah protect us. And this is something that's filthy, but there's people that do this. Likewise, that would also require ghusl. So those things are haram. There's some people that are perverted. They have intercourse with children. They violate children. All of these things are things that are forbidden, but they require ghusl nonetheless. You understand? If the person were to repent and want to pray again. You understand? So likewise, but normally speaking, what the situation would entail, what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's permissible, is a man that is married to another woman and they are intimate with one another. Whenever the private part of the man during sexual intercourse disappears into the private part of the woman, into her front private part, I should say, then that will result in them both being in a state of janaba, irrespective of whether either one of them reaches climax or not. So, in that case, it's irrelevant whether they reach climax or not. They will still have to perform ghusl. You understand? Now, he says, وَمَنْ رَأَى فِي مَنَامِهِ, he says, whoever sees in his sleep, كَأَنَّهُ يُجَامِعُ, as though he or she is having sexual intercourse, وَلَمْ يَخْرُجْ مِنْهُ مَنِيٌّ, but there's no sperm that comes out of him, فَلَا شَيْءًا عَلَيْهِ, then he doesn't have to do ghusl. So sometimes a person can have a dream that's not a wet dream, it's a sexual dream, it's a sensual dream. You see yourself having intercourse, you see yourself, experiencing pleasure, but nothing comes out of you. There's no sperm that comes out of you. In that case, you don't have to make ghusl. Ghusl is only when something comes out of you. He says, وَمَنْ وَجَدَ فِي ثَوْبِهِ مَنِيًّا يَابِسًا. So whoever would say wakes up or is walking and then he finds on his clothes he finds dry sperm. لا يدري متى أصابه, he doesn't know exactly when this occurred. اغتسل, he makes a ghusl, it's required for him to make ghusl. وعاد, and he repeats ما صلى, he repeats whatever he had prayed من آخر نومه, from the last time, من آخر نومة نامها فيه, from the last time that he had, من آخر نومة نامها فيه, from the last time that he had slept, basically. Understand? So say I slept last night. That's the last time I slept, right? And I wake up and I wake up sometime around I wake up at Fajr. I make wudu. I had a dream. I didn't have any type of sexual dream or anything like that, right? And I'm just walking. I slept. I wake up at Fajr. I make wudu. I pray Fajr like it's normal. I have the same clothes on. I pray Dhuhr like it's normal. Then after Dhuhr, I look at my clothes that I went to sleep with, and I realize, oh, there's sperm on these clothes. So that means that I had some type of ejaculatory experience last night. There's fluid that came out of me. So that means that I have to go and make ghusl to remove that from me. And I also have to pray Fajr and I have to pray Dhuhr because I prayed them in a state of janaba. You understand? I prayed them in a state of janaba. So I have to go and redo those prayers because those two prayers were not valid. So essentially the principle is, even if you have a sexual dream but nothing emerges from you, then you don't have to make ghusl. But even if you don't have a dream and you just in the midst of sleep sperm comes out of you, because that occurs normally, you have to make ghusl. You understand? So this is the introductory element of ghusl. So once again we'll review. He says يجب الغسل من ثلاثة أشياء. He says that ghusl is wajib for three things. The first is al-janaba, is major ritual impurity. Wal-hayd, the second is the end of the menstrual cycle for the woman. Wal-nafasi, and the third is the end of postpartum bleeding for a woman that had just given birth. He says فَالْجَنَابَةُ قِسْمَانِ. He says janaba, major ritual impurity, is of two types. قِسْمان is of two types. أحدهما, the first of them, خُرُوجُ الْمَنِي, is the emission of sperm بِلَذَّةٍ مُعْتَادَةٍ, through the experience of normally occurring pleasure. Fi naumin, that occurs while you might be sleeping, we call it a wet dream. Aw yaqadhin, or it can happen in a wakeful state, bijima'in, through like sexual intercourse. Aw ghayrihi, or something other than sexual intercourse, such as masturbation, such as groping, such as looking, things of that nature. Wathani, and the second type of janaba, maghibul hashafati fil farji, is the disappearance of the tip of the private part of a man into a sexual organ. You understand? The reason why it says fil farji, into a sexual organ, is because of the fact that what should occur is a man and a woman, but because some people are perverted and they might go against what is supposed to occur, he just leaves it as general. It's similar to the fact that it tells you that if you as-sukara, to be drunk, right? To be intoxicated, it nullifies your wudu. So that if you get drunk and you were to wake up and want to pray, you have to make wudu again. But being drunk is not halal in the first place. But even then, despite the fact that it's not halal, if someone were to happen to do it, then what they need to do in order to pray again, and when they're not drunk anymore, is to make wudu and pray. So this is a similar situation. He says, وَمَنْ رَأَى, he says, and whoever sees min manamihi, and he sleep كأنه, that he is يجامع, that he's having intercourse. So he sees himself having intercourse in a dream. وَلَمْ يَخْرُجْ مِنْهُ مَنِيٍّ وَلَمْ يَخْرُجْ مِنْهُ مَنِيٌّ, but yet nothing comes out of him. There's no sperm that comes out of him, or no ejaculatory fluid that comes out of her. فَلَا شَيْءٍ عَلَيْهِ, then there's no ghusl that's obligatory upon him. He doesn't have to do ghusl. You understand? وَمَنْ وَجَدَ فِي ثَوْبِهِ مَنِيًّا, whoever sees وَمَنْ وَجَدَ فِي ثَوْبِهِ مَنِيًّا, whoever finds sperm yabisan, dry sperm on his thobe. وَمَنْ وَجَدَ فِي ثَوْبِهِ مَنِيًّا yabisan, whoever finds dry sperm on his clothes. لَا يَدْرِي مَتَى أَصَابَهُ, but has no idea when exactly it happened. اغتسل, he performs ghusl. وَعَادَ مَا صَلَّ مِنْ آخِرِ نَوْمَةٍ نَامَهَا فِيهِ, and he reprays whatever he prays since the last time that he slept. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. We'll end it here. In the next section, next week, we'll talk about the fara'id of ghusl, meaning the obligations of ghusl, and its sunnahs, and its recommended acts. And we'll also talk about what's impermissible for a person that is not in a state of ghusl to do, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair, ya ikhwan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this from us. Assalamu alaikum.